Take a breath. Yeah, right there. Welcome to Take That Truth and Walk With It with Reverend Rich P., the podcast where real life meets real spirit. This isn't just talk. This is practical spirituality. This is faith in action. We're diving into the moments you live every day, the wins, the struggles, the how did I even get here seasons, and pulling the truth out of them. Not the polished truth, the real truth, the kind you can actually use. So whether you're on your way to work, sitting in your car trying to get your mind right, or just looking for a word that hits different, you're in the right place. Because here's the deal, you already have what you need. We're just here to remind you. Let's get into it.
Hey, I'm glad you're here. I've been thinking about something this week. Actually, it's been on my mind for a while. The funny thing is I didn't realize what I was feeling until someone asked me a really simple question. They said, "So how are you really doing?" Not the polite version, not the answer that we give at church or we post online, but the real answer. And I caught myself doing what a lot of us do. I smiled, I joked, I tried to kind of shake it out and trying to change the subject. Then I got quiet because honestly, didn't know how to answer. Maybe you've had one of those moments, not because life was falling apart, just because you've been carrying so much for so long that you forgot what it felt like not to. That's what I want to talk about today. Not loneliness the way we usually think about it, something a little bit different. So before we get started, as always, this is Take That Truth and Walk With It. My name is Rev Rich, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. So let's think about that question real quick. Somebody asked, how are you really doing? What are you carrying? What is it that you're not allowing to come out? So many years ago, I used to believe that loneliness meant being by yourself. Hell, in fact, I used to be afraid of being alone a lot of times. But it's not how I feel anymore. Some of the loneliest moments of my life happened in crowded rooms. There's people talking, laughing, music playing, and everybody thinks, he's fine. He's just hanging out. He's a wallflower. He's not talking about it. But to be fair, the way I was acting made them think that. And I spent many years, serving people. Ministry has a funny way of doing that. People come because they're hurting. You pray with them, you encourage them, you remind them God hasn't forgotten them. And I love doing that. I love coaching. I love the Reiki treatments. I really do. But sometimes along the way, I realize something. It's possible to spend your whole day listening to everyone else's heart and never tell anyone what's happening inside yours. That's a dangerous place to be, not because you're weak, but because you're human. I grew up believing that strength looked like handling everything yourself. I've always made it abundantly clear throughout my podcast that I've always had an issue with asking for help. Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe it was just my machismo. Maybe it was ego. I don't know. And maybe it was fear of rejection. I think that one is a big one for a lot of us. We don't want to admit it, but sometimes we don't ask for help because we kind of feel like if they say no, we're going to get hurt. So, somewhere we also came to believe that asking for help was a failure. We just keep going no matter how hard it is and say, hey, we'll figure it out. We push through. We keep going. We don't complain. And, sometimes we can look back in our life and realize we don't even know who taught us that. Maybe nobody actually said it, but maybe we absorbed it. And I've noticed something. The strongest people I know aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who stop pretending they don't. They took me a while to learn, and I still catch myself wanting to say, I'm good, even when I'm not. And not because I'm trying to lie, because I don't want to be a burden. How have you ever felt that way? I know I do all the time. A lot of times I'll shed tears because I got to push through it. But I'd rather do that than ask for help. And I've had to teach myself that. And I want my kids and everyone around me to know that. Ask for help. And maybe that's why, I've fallen into people pleasing and things like that, because of the fact that I don't want anybody to ever ask me for help and get a no and feel rejected. I want everybody to come to me knowing that if it is in my power, that I am ready and willing to help. And if I don't have it in my power, the way I will help is by finding someone who can. But, let's look back. Once we understand that we felt like a burden and don't want to ask, we're quick to help everyone else, like I said. And you convince yourself you deal with your own stuff later. And later always turns into years. How many of us are dealing with traumas in our 50s for things that happened in our childhood? Because we kept pushing it down, thinking it's okay. So funny thing was, not long ago, I was talking with someone after a service. It's a normal thing that goes on. And we started talking about ordinary things. We talked about what they're doing at work right now, how their families is, how life is going. Then they looked at me and said, I don't think anyone really knows me. They weren't talking about strangers. They meant people they've known for years. And again, that sentence stayed with me. How many of us are introducing people to a version of ourselves instead of our real selves? And it's not because we're trying to be fake, but we're scared. Scared that they'll see parts of us that we're still trying to fix, that old trauma still living on our face, or something that happened in the past, and we're still dealing with imposter syndrome. Maybe they'll think we're scared that they'll think less of us, maybe that they'll leave. So we begin to change ourselves. We smile a little bigger, we say everything's fine, and we become experts at surviving conversations without ever being known. And trust me, it's exhausting. It will wear you down when you have to change yourself. I'll just share a quick story before we get into more of the practicing here. But I remember becoming a speaker. I've always wanted to be a motivational speaker. I've, met people at different seminars and conferences, and they each had something unique that I loved. And the most important part was that the motivational speaker, for me at that time, and that's evolved, was someone who helped people through their words. So they weren't physically helping. They were literally speaking, hoping people would take a chance. Then I started to learn that there were 3 types of speakers. There's your motivational speaker. There's your inspirational speaker. That's the one that inspires you. You get excited, you breathe something in. But again, it leaves the person having to decide. Motivational, I know the joke is that, you wake up excited wondering why you were even excited in the first place. And the inspirational speaker, not a bird person. From the book Aspire, which works with the etymology of words, he said that inspire means to breathe into. So as an inspirational speaker, you're breathing knowledge into people. Now it's up to them to breathe in and take action behind it. And then finally was the transformational speaker. That was a person who was able to not only use their own story to illustrate an example, but to also give them a time to be able to choose what goes next. So I always want to be a transformational speaker. But I also became imposter syndrome because I was so worried about, was I saying the right thing? Was my life an example? Things like that. So we edit ourselves. And then when I got to, the Unity ministry that I'm at, people were very soft-spoken when they talked. They weren't that, that high energy person. And it wasn't that preacher that I know from more traditional Christianity. So I started to edit myself. And I realized that by the time I edited myself, I was no longer myself. I was just talking to talk. So let's try not to edit ourselves this week, but let's go ahead and move forward. So Jesus, as we know, didn't build a brand. When we read the Gospels, whether it's you read it in your childhood or you've seen the movies, doesn't matter how you got the knowledge. But Jesus didn't surround himself with fans. He surrounded himself with friends. People saw him teach crowds. What they didn't always see was him sitting around with the fire with 12 people, and he would talk to them. They would get together for eating and laughing and walking down dusty roads, asking questions and listening. Even Jesus stepped away from that crowd for his own self. For his own self-worth and his own self-care. Excuse me. That's what I was trying to say. So he stepped away to pray and meditate. So if the Son of God made room for close relationships, why do you think we can live without them? Sometimes we confuse visibility and with connection. They're not the same thing. They can have hundreds of people following you and still feel invisible. Unity has always pointed us here. And one of those ideas that I do love about unity is the expression of divine life, that we're never separated from God. We're always connected. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, talked about the Christ within each person. And I've wondered if part of seeing the Christ in someone else is letting them see it in us. Not just our polished side, but our whole story. And the healing often starts the moment someone says, "Me too." And I guess for those who have heard the word namaste or namaskar, that's pretty much it. It's a greeting, letting them know that you see that divinity in them. And a lot of my old videos, you'll hear me say, I just want to bid you namaste, because that big and beautiful divinity in me sees that big and beautiful divinity in you, because that's what's important. If I can see the Christ in you and you can tap into your own Christ, you can see the Christ in me. So what changed for me was I started to make one small change. I used to, when someone asked, "How are you?" I try to answer the actual question, not every detail. I'm not trying to vomit all over them. I'm just telling them, hey, instead of just "I'm fine," my answer might be, "Yeah, it's been a hard week, but I'm good." Or, "I'm discouraged." Sometimes that's just "I'm hopeful." And every one of these answers is honest. It's not about vomiting on them. And something interesting happens because people usually become honest too. Truth has been a way of giving people permission. So imagine I say, "Hey, it's been a long week. I'm exhausted. I'm trying to get all these projects done and I'm just feeling out of it." And the person says, "You know what? I can understand that. I also had a hard week as well, and I'm glad we're at the weekend and I get to relax a little bit, and I wish that on you as well." So let's go ahead and talk about what you need to do this week. So think of one person, just one, someone who has earned the right to hear the right answer. Go ahead and give them a call, meet them for coffee, send the text that you've been putting off. And when they ask how you're doing, don't give them the automatic answer. Give them the honest one. Not because you need someone to rescue you, but because none of us were created to carry life alone. So that's your walking orders for this week. Choose one person, reach out to them, whether you call them, text them, take them out for coffee, doesn't matter. And when they ask you how you're doing, be honest. Again, do not vomit all over them. Just say, "Hey, you know what? I'm a little discouraged. I'm a little out of it." And let them come back and say, "Hey, tell me more." So before we wrap up, and maybe you've been listening today thinking, I don't really have anyone like that. If that's where you are, don't lose hope. Real friendship usually don't appear overnight. They grow. They grow one conversation at a time. It's one honest moment at a time and one act of courage at a time. You don't have to know 50 people deeply. One genuine connection can change your life. So if today's conversation reminded you of someone, send this episode to them, not because it's perfect, but because it might open up a conversation the two of you have needed to have for a long time. You can always connect with me at revrichp.com. And if you're looking for a way to keep those conversations going throughout the week, check out the Take That Truth and Walk With It journal experience. So until next Wednesday, as always, take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings.
Take a breath. Let that settle in. Now, don't just hear it, walk it. Because truth isn't something you collect, it's something you live. And the moment you start applying it, everything begins to shift. If something spoke to you today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, pass it on. Be the light in somebody else's moment. And if you're ready to go deeper, more tools, more truth, more ways to live this thing out in real time, head over to revrichp.com. That's where we keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay grounded, stay intentional, and keep showing up as who you already are. Take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings.